Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your attendance at this our midweek opposition press briefing as we continue to address urgent matters of public concern confronting our nation. I wish to welcome and thank members of the media and the thousands locked on various social media platforms. I am Rushton Paray, Member of Parliament for the Mayaro constituency. I am the opposition spokesperson on all matters governing trade and industry. Joining me today is Ms. Anita Haynes, Member of Parliament for Tabakit and opposition spokesperson on matters of education. Today, MP Haynes and I will discuss key issues of the PNM's inability to govern and their continued inability to hold the country together. While there are several other critical matters, such as the devastating effects of crime, growing poverty and unemployment, we would concentrate today on the desperate crisis of our fast crumbling infrastructure. I will now invite my parliamentary colleague, Ms. Haynes, to address you.
Thank you, MP Paray, and good morning to those of you who are locked on as we discuss this very, very critical issue. Allow me to take the opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition as well as my our parliamentary colleagues for giving us this opportunity where we will utilize in part our constituency issues to highlight a wider problem of failing, collapsing, crumbling infrastructure. But I want to start this morning discussing what the key role of a parliamentarian is. Both MP Paray and myself sit in the House of Representatives. We have a twofold responsibility to our constituents, the constituents of Tabakit, the constituents of Mayaro. We have a legislative function where we think about the laws that govern our land, where we have to think about the policy that the executive is enacting and what that means for our nation. And we have a representative function where we are our primary advocates for our constituents. Both MP Paray and myself, we sit on the opposition bench, which means that we have the key responsibility of lobbying the government, the executive, for the goods and services that our government is expected or to provide to citizens of this country. But what happens when a government refuses to do its job? What happens when you have members of parliament, and this obtains for both PNM and UNC members of parliament? Everyone has to go to the government, cap in hand, and request work for their constituents. What happens when an executive decides that they are not providing basic goods and services to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? But then the entire system collapses. The entire system quite literally and figuratively collapses. And so here we are today. I am sure MP Paray would love to be able to talk about trade and industry and where we can take our country forward with hard work and the ingenuity of our people and what we can do to build our nation, to increase our economic standing. I would love to be able to sit here and talk about education policy, talking about the next generation of Trinidadians and Tobagonians and what we can do to make a difference for our nation so we could create the type of Trinidad and Tobago that we hope to see. Instead, we have to spend our time today speaking about collapsing infrastructure. The first role of the government, the main role of the government, is to provide basic goods and services like the roadworks. It is a public good. It belongs in the hands of the executive. Some months ago, earlier this year, there was a Guardian article saying, fix your own potholes. I don't know if anybody recalls that. Where they were telling you as the citizen, as a taxpayer, who would have already paid your money into the system to allow yourself and your neighbors access to this public good, they are telling you, pay again and do the work that they are supposed to do. This PNM administration has, in the past 7 years, successfully lowered the bar to below the ground. They have taken the bar that citizens no longer expect the Ministry of Works to work. That citizens no longer expect that anything will be done for things like a pothole or major road works. Instead, you have to wait till the entire area is collapsing, falling apart, before you get some attention. Note I said attention and not work. And so here we are. In 2020, I started as a member of parliament a Fix Our Roads Tabkeep campaign. I would have done that in order to properly advocate and represent for my constituents, so that we would use, during the pandemic, virtual means of getting the information so that I can adequately use my parliamentary platform to represent for their issues. We have been highlighting deplorable road conditions. The campaign looks at land movement, the failure of bridges, dilapidated wooden bridges, poor drainage, the lack of access to pipe-borne water. Again, this is 2022. And these are all issues that we've been facing for the past 2 years, for sure, since I've been the representative, that I've seen with my own 2 eyes. We have been lobbying to the relevant authorities, having sent over 100 letters to Ministry of Works and Transport, Rural Development, Local Government, Public Utilities, WASA, and other state agencies, all in an effort to adequately represent for the needs of my constituents. We have had legislative debates, motions, matters on the adjournment, standing finance committee, urgent questions, using the parliamentary platform, all in an effort to say to this PNM administration, do the job you asked for when you stood on the political platform and said to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, you are prepared to govern. And so here we are today. Here we are today discussing the fact that parts of Trinidad and Tobago and parts of my constituency of Tabaquite are completely losing access. And so I'm going to show you some severe incidents where my community is being completely cut off. We will look at the Guaracara Tabaquite Road. This situation has been going on for about 4 months. It is a significant public hazard. Despite the constant liaising with the Minister of Works and Transport, who also visited the mudslide, we have been back and forth with government agencies asking that you fix this horrendous situation. Yes, we understand that there are other circumstances that may have caused the mudslide, but there is a role for the government to protect the interests and to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You cannot tell me that you are expected to go to and from work passing through where the mud is slipping on a daily basis. Talks between Ministry of Works and WASA, information coming to my office, is that they cannot decide amongst themselves who ought to go in and do the necessary work to stop the mudslide from taking place. And so where are we now? While they are fiddling, as they fiddle while Rome burns, figuring out who will take ultimate responsibility, my constituents, the residents of Tabaquite, are passing on a sliver of roadway, mudslide on one hand, and road collapsing on the next side. And that is what they want to pass as acceptable governance. That is what they want to pass as and put forward to the population as being acceptable. Mind you, they have been speaking about an all-of-government approach. And so if that actually existed, it wouldn't matter if WASA needed to do something or Ministry of Works needed to do something. Something would have been done by now. And so the alternative route through Piparo is long, terrible condition, dark, lonely. We've had criminal activity on the roadway at night. There are dilapidated wooden bridges on the alternative route. Vehicles have been damaged. Children cannot get to school. I woke up this morning to rainfall. Every time there is rainfall, I know for a fact I am going to get a call that the land has moved further into the road, that the mud has moved further into the road, and that it is now impassable. I want to turn as well to another community of Coruscant, also in danger of being completely cut off. When I raised this issue in Parliament, When I raised it with the Minister of Works, the Minister of Works told me remarkably that no community in Trinidad and Tobago is in danger of being completely cut off. When we take a look at the Coruscant Road, the residents are unable to drive their cars there. If you do not have a 4x4 vehicle, right now, you're not passing there. If you do have a 4x4 vehicle, you're not sure if when you leave for work in the morning and you're coming back home in the evening, if you are able to pass there. Mind you, I conducted a media tour in Coruscant, having a meeting with WASA, TCL, and the corporation, raised these issues since 2020, Coruscant being a community without pipe-borne water in 2022. So on top of having no water, they must have no road, no access to the outside world. I mean, you cannot live like this, not when a government is charged with the responsibility of providing a public good like the roads and national infrastructure. I want to take a look at the Tortuga region. That has deteriorated rapidly over the period of the past few weeks. During the Standing Finance Committee, what appeared as cracks in the roadway, I raised it with the Minister of Works again. I said, listen, while we were sitting in chamber, cracks have appeared in the roadway. I said, we need to get something done here quickly or we will end up with a bigger problem. The village will not be able to use this road in short order. True to form, nothing was done. I followed up my conversation, as is the procedure, with written requests for assistance. As per usual, no response. 3 areas along the roadway have proceeded to collapse within a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. Motorists have to drive off the road into the side of the road in the hope of just passing to get to their homes. Imagine residents are coming together to buy material, to take the advice of this derelict and useless Ministry of Works to say that they will fix their own road because they cannot count on a ministry who has an established duty to maintain the road infrastructure of this country. When we look at the Caratal community, it is the same story. Prolonged infrastructural neglect, dilapidated roads, which means that garbage trucks are now refusing to go in there because they cannot. You are getting to a point where you cannot access basic services because the vehicles cannot go into the communities. If that does not mean that they are cut off, I don't know what the ministry is waiting on. This landslip is situated right next to our school. You have these children going to school in severe danger. And so when we look at the Claxton Bay area, Forest Park and Claxton Bay has gotten so bad that a government agency by way of SWIMCOL, who operates the landfill in Forest Park, wrote to me as the Member of Parliament last year to see if I can ask on their behalf to a government where they are state agency to help them with the road because they are unable to get in and out of the landfill. And so, a state agency writing to an opposition MP, where's the line? Where's the all of government approach? I use all of these to illustrate. We have on the main road in Gasparillo, the Bonaventure main road, Raguba Outfall. This is a main thoroughfare. It takes you onto the highway to get you out of the Gasparillo Tabaquite region and onto the highway. Look at this this is where everyone is expected to pass. The police station is not too far from there. If you have to have rapid response to crime, you're in for real problems, significant problems. We've been told they can't do anything until dry season, but they did one bit of shoring up work in the beginning and nothing since then. We had a report of an area in Mamaral where similarly the land started to slip. Very quickly and thankfully, very thankfully, some work was done to stabilize the area. What is unique about the Mamaral boundary in my constituency? It is the only boundary I share with a member on the other side. It is the only boundary in my constituency that I share with a PNM member. So when the land moved earlier this week, in the same week, we got some stabilization work. Everywhere else, letters being written, questions being asked, advocacy being done, and all falling on deaf ears. And so I use that to illustrate Trinidad and Tobago. When a government fails, a country fails. I hope you understand that what this PNM administration has done with the consistent lowering of the bar, with the consistent reduction of expectations, telling you, the citizens, to expect less because you deserve less, and that we have made the fact that we live in a pothole paradise a part of our national joke, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. The fact is, that means that a government that cannot solve small problems, basic needs, road infrastructure, that if you get the engineers in the right room, that you could solve that problem very quickly with the resources that the government has, that they have found that impossible to do. You cannot expect this PNM administration to solve any big problems. You cannot expect them to talk about trade and industry. You cannot expect them to innovate in education. You cannot expect financial security. You cannot expect economic growth. You cannot expect safety, because they cannot fix potholes. That is where we are, Trinidad and Tobago. And so I turn over to you, MP Paray.
Thank you very much, MP Anita Haynes, for that stirring description of what is happening in Tabaquite. And I am sure by all expressions, it's happening throughout the country. Firstly, I want to say that I'm pleased to be here in person after having to leave Mayaro at 7 a.m. to get to Port of Spain for 11 because of the calamity that is happening on the Manzanilla stretch at this time. I'm also happy to see my colleague from Tabaquite, because I know, based on what she's now said, the conditions of roadways and bridges and so on are a threat to everyone's mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, every corner of our country, including our capital city, today is under siege. The electoral constituencies that we represent, along with several others, are terribly affected. And this is having adverse effects on commuting, businesses, schools, food production, and other essential daily activities. Trinidad and Tobago is now one big disaster zone. What we are witnessing across the country, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete disaster. It is the literal destruction of our society. The fact that this Rowley government has no concern about the devastation we are seeing is further proof that this is a collapsed regime. This is a failed regime, a failed state, which will lead to a failed society. As I continue to address the awful state of our country's infrastructure, I wish to put it in the context of the extensive funding the government has received to repair and maintain our roads and bridges and other areas of national transportation. In particular, I speak about the TT $9 billion, which was loaned to the government by the Development Bank of Latin America, also called CAF, for the explicit purpose of restoring and maintaining our infrastructure. $9 billion. And that does not include two loans that were initiated last week for a total of $160 million US, or a further 1 billion TT dollars. Of those new loans, US $120 million are for a similar purpose, improving our roads and bridges. One of the two loan agreements signed on Tuesday provides for drainage works in flood-hit communities. But the Rowley government has not shown any zeal in remedying this recurring serious problem. The other US $40 million is for digitization of the public sector, a project that has been stalled, leaving our public service still shuffling papers while others are in a modern digital format. While the global economy has utilized digitization to become more efficient and competitive, Trinidad and Tobago's tardy initiative remains at a snail pace, one-person exercise with no track record of performance. The World Bank reminds us that infrastructure affects growth through several supply and demand side channels. Investments in energy, telecommunications, and transport networks directly impact growth, and all types of infrastructure represent an essential input in any production of goods and services. Colleagues, members of the media, you may recall the Minister of Works and Transport saying that there is not sufficient money to carry out repairs and maintenance of our infrastructure. That is his hopelessly lame excuse for permitting our roads and bridges to become the worst in the hemisphere. What the minister and his colleague, the Minister of Finance, have not told the nation is that over the past 7 years, their government has signed several agreements with CAF for infrastructure development. As I said before, this is roughly total at over 9 billion TT dollars. You may wish to ask the Minister of Finance for evidence of the use of those funds for the purpose for which they were given. Your parliamentary opposition have been posting similar questions for months, both in and out of the parliament. We raised the issue during the budget debate and on every occasion when we speak of the pain and distress being faced by our citizens. The government has refused to account for these large sums borrowed in the names of all taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. There has been no probity and transparency on the money accessed on behalf of the citizens. Today, ladies and gentlemen, as our infrastructure crumbles into its most disastrous state, we again publicly raise this serious matter. We also advise that we will consider legal recourse unless the government provides a plausible account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We will not permit the government to treat these loans as their personal property and to utilize them for election campaign purposes. In addition, we are asking the officials of CAF to take an interest in this sensitive financial matter and utilize communication channels with the government to insist on detailed and public accountability. I must say that we respect CAF and the work that it is doing. Our queries have nothing to do with this reputable institution, but we are upholding and defending the rights of our citizens who, as taxpayers, have to repay these loans. In fact, these loans add to Trinidad and Tobago's heavy debt portfolio and would be a financial burden even for our grandchildren. So, if we could continue to be relentless on this issue, we'd have to expose the government internationally if we have to. I raise this matter about the use of CAF loans in the context of the ongoing rampant destruction of our infrastructure. I wish to present a few examples from my own constituency which can be applied to every other constituency in this country. The Naparima-Miara Road, which links Princestown with the rest of southeast Trinidad, has been further wrecked by torrential downpours. Over the past 10 days, heavy commercial trucks keep getting stuck in a broken down part of the road in the community of Robert Village Tableland. Thousands of commuters become stranded, leading to severe physiological and physical distress. My colleagues, the MP for Moruga Tableland, Ms. Michelle Benjamin, and MP for Princestown, Mr. Barry Padrat, were on site yesterday, making a passionate call for the Minister of Works and Transport to at least respond to their calls. This alone shows the callousness and the resentment pitted out against citizens in this country. These incidents cut off road communications among tens of thousands of residents and commuters. School children, delivery vehicles, emergency service providers, commercial trucks, and others have been stranded, costing this country millions of man-hours in an already depressed economy. While these mishaps were the worst so far, the entire Naparima-Miara Road from Monrepo roundabout to Galiota Point is in a ruined state with crater-sized potholes, landslides, and dilapidated bridges. The Naparima-Miara Road has become one long depression that has been adversely affecting the daily lives of thousands of citizens. I have pleaded repeatedly for repair works going as far back as 2016. As MP Haynes said, she has 100 letters in 2 years. I have 1,000 in 7 years. And yet no one knows what is being done with the $9 billion borrowed for the purpose of fixing these and other roads. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to remind you that the CAF loans augment the allocations in the national budget to the Ministry of Works and Transport and its various agencies. In other words, the $9 billion is only part of the funding for improving our public facilities. So we therefore ask, what has been done with this money? While the Naparima-Miara Road and other primary and secondary roads are permitted to deteriorate into ruins, what has the Ministry of Works and Transport been doing with its annual allocation for capital works? We understand that the PNM government has a wretched track record of blatant rural neglect. The PNM has never placed emphasis on the lives of people whom the party feels do not provide political support. That is the viciousness and pettiness of successful PNM regimes. But even with such maliciousness, the abandonment of rural infrastructure is cruel, nasty, and unforgivable. This is a new low, even for the PNM. It is vindictiveness to the elderly, our youth, our entrepreneurs, the self-employed, and even our visitors. This is a particularly despicable since our infrastructure has been allowed to get to its most terrible state in our history. Another important roadway, the Torib Tabakit Road, is riddled with potholes and landslips to the point where you require expert navigating skills to drive through. Now this road serves as a secondary route from Rio Claro to Princestown via Brothers Road and to San Fernando via Marabella. The Brothers Road access leg to New Grant is literally being held together by lampposts and grassroots. Again, this is further evidence of the abandonment by the Minister of Works and Transport and this government. If we turn our look to the eastern seaboard, along Manzanilla and other communities, they have been virtually cut off from the rest of the country as a result of recent rains. The area fondly known as the Coconuts is under several inches of floodwater today, as much as 24 inches in some areas. This route continues to be flooded out because of the overflow of the Nerva Swamp. Due to inconsiderate and perhaps illegal developing of lands in the sequential diverting of water courses, again, thousands of man-hours and school hours are now being lost. I'm calling on the Minister of Works and Transport to act urgently and swiftly to launch an immediate investigation into this illegal development, which is, as I have been told, is the primary cause of the flooding and destruction of the Manzanilla roadway. The Manzanilla Road is under the authority of the Highways Division, Ministry of Works and Transport. As of today, there have not been one word from the Minister, the Ministry, nor the Highways Division. Every day as Member of Parliament, I am bombarded with requests to update to my commuting constituents on the condition of the Manzanilla roadway. It has become so bad that HR departments are asking stranded employees in Mayaro to present proof of this blocked artery to Port of Spain. HR departments are accepting my Facebook post as proof. I call on the minister and the ministry to put on their big boy hats and take responsibility today. Provide the country with daily updates on the thoroughfare and say what remedial works are in the pipeline to address the same. On my way to Port of Spain today, I can certify and verify that parts of the roadway is now in a collapsing state because of the velocity of the runoff. So we are asking that no vehicles, absolutely none, attempt to traverse that section of the Manzanilla roadway until further notice. And please, I'm asking the Minister of Works and Transport to send your engineers, send all those fancy drones that you have expended taxpayers' money on, and go and give our citizens daily updates as to what's happening. As of today, I have been told by the Sandy Grande Regional Corporation that no one from the Ministry of Works and Transport have been tasked with the clearing of any drainage to facilitate the runoff at a much faster rate. I make a further call to the Minister of Works and Transport to facilitate the movement of children, school children, and other emergency workers from Mayaro to Sandy Grande via PTSC buses. We must not become victims of 18 inches of water and a visionless P&M administration. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, businesses are badly affected in the region. In fact, the business community in Southeast Trinidad, like other parts of the country, are paying a huge price for the terrible state of our infrastructure and this P&M government's general lack of care and concern. Let me give you one example as an indication of the adverse effect on business. A local family-owned hardware in Rio Claro has invested heavily to upgrade their facility into a manufacturing company that is involved in wholesale and retail distributorship throughout the country. This business employs hundreds of men and women in the Mayaro constituency. The company is expecting to receive 2 40-foot containers of goods within the next few days. But you know what happened? The trucking company says it would not deliver for fear of damaging their trucks and endangering the goods within their care. Now multiply this situation tenfold or more. Businesses will grind to a halt while the government remains disinterested and detached. I call on the Minister of Trade and Industry to take an interest in this matter and encourage her cabinet colleagues to step up or step out. I encourage the Honorable Minister of Trade to think of the impact on business, on employment, and the ability for business people to meet their banking commitments at the end of the day. I remind you that these challenges being faced by the business community are in addition to those caused by crime, which is also having a shattering effect on the sector. You would recall more than 6,000 small and medium-sized businesses were forced into closure by poor policy decisions during the COVID-19 pandemic. The SME sector amounts to about 75% of all businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. They are employers of thousands of workers and they are the lifeblood of most communities, small and micro enterprise, proper small rural communities like those found in Mayaro and the Tabakit constituency. They play a major role in stirring local economy and it upholds the middle class, who in turn purchases goods and services to keep the cycle going. Ladies and gentlemen, the dreadful state of our infrastructure and the crime pandemic are making our SMEs an endangered species. Members of the media, this is a mere snapshot of the destruction of our infrastructure. These urgent and critical examples are in addition to those in various other areas of the country, especially in rural districts, and more so, those represented by opposition members of parliament. My colleague told us about the horrendous situation in the Tabakit constituency. Brasso Village and Grand Pouva, Brothers Road, Preparo, Sisters Road, Saunders Road, and other traces are in shambles. There is a major risk to life and limbs in driving, trying to traverse those roads. It is a test of your nerves and your fortitude. It also calls you to provide regular repairs on your vehicle, and the Ministry of Works Licensing Division spares no time in issuing tickets for broken down vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, all of this means that a large part of the country remains severed and isolated, while the PNM government remains aloof and unresponsive. You would also recall that the government had announced plans to establish a drainage authority as a specific agency. That too is a non-starter. Let me bring you back to Mayaro for a minute or two, where we have Point Radix in Mayaro, where several telecommunication firms, along with the Ministry of National Security and energy companies, have vital communication links. It is also home to a holiday resort, nature park, and several farmers on the Bovell estate. The road leading to that site crumbled 2 weekends ago due to the heavy downpour. The implications of this situation, ladies and gentlemen, are dire. We are sitting on a time bomb anytime our telecommunication equipment malfunctions or requires immediate servicing, since this road remains impassable. Again, the authorities were negligent in abandoning the road and in not responding to the current crisis. I wish to remind authorities that a nation's telecommunications network is a crucial resource that must be properly maintained and preserved. The facilities could have an impact on the country's national security. We are all conscious that security is a major national bugbear. Progressive countries treat their telecommunications facilities as protected and carefully maintained fortresses. But this slipshod and incompetent PNM government could not care less. We are also being told today that the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission is contemplating cutting off power to the Point Radix Peninsula because of a couple of fallen electricity poles housing high-tension wires. This, ladies and gentlemen, is unattainable. In addition, there is repeated destruction in central Trinidad caused by flood, which is in itself another national emergency. It is unimaginable and unacceptable that this dreadful state of affairs exists on this tiny island, one in which the government has borrowed large sums of funds to fix and maintain our road and bridges infrastructure. I call again on the Minister of Finance to account for the $9 billion. And if it is not 9, tell the nation how much it is and what projects it facilitated. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, the horrible state of our roads is impacting our students' education because it means school children are often marooned at their homes for days at a time. This situation is layering on top of an already collapsing education sector. Our wrecked infrastructure means that police, fire, and medical service personnel often cannot turn up with urgency at the scene of an emergency. It means that providers of goods such as cooking gas and foodstuff may not be able to get into some rural communities very soon. It means that maxi and taxi fares in several areas have increased. In some cases, the services have been disrupted totally. As I indicated, it is hurting our business community. And this too, this suffering will trickle down to the workers who are employed in those very same businesses. Take note that today our jobless figure still stands at around 150,000. And if the floods they are facing are not bad enough, our farmers are seeing trouble in delivering their crops. Several agricultural access roads have been washed and rinsed, and it's now settled at the bottom of several river basins. And yet, not one of the 3 ministers of agriculture has uttered one word to our farming community as far as a strategic intervention is concerned. These terrible conditions are all in communities with the highest levels of unemployment and poverty. Statistics confirm that joblessness and the quality of life are worse in far-flung districts, especially those without fixed industries. Even at Guayaguayari and Mayaro, which sit alongside the offshore energy sector, there is steep unemployment. The PNM government has refused to develop the port of Galeota into its second phase. In closing, let me remind all that the effects of poor roads are particularly harsh on single mothers, pensioners, and the disabled. They are made to endure even more difficulties with transportation as a result of this appalling and shameless rural neglect by a spiteful Rowley administration. Some of them cannot even get to a pharmacy for their CDAP medication. Members of the media, again, this is a snapshot of the circumstances that is presenting itself in the constituencies we represent. But I am sure this is the same picture that you would see in many constituencies. This is a historic national emergency, but the government is once more missing in action while hundreds of thousands of people are suffering hardship this morning. I want to leave you with a statement made by Amory Brown, Minister of Government, and reported in the Trinidad Express on November 21st. And I quote, "Additionally, Brown said that every citizen has a responsibility to uphold TNT in a positive light." And he said this includes the example set by leaders and the way the media reports the news. So this PNM regime is blaming the media for reporting crime rather than dealing with crime and other ailments affecting this country. I urge you, members of the media, you are our fourth estate. You serve as the watchdog over the three others, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Remain steadfast in your duty to the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you all for your kind attendance and your coverage this morning. We are available and anxious to respond to your questions, should you have any. Thank you.
We have some questions, MP Parry. First of all, to Ms. Haynes, you mentioned the issues you're facing in Tamaki currently. We know that your constituency has a large amount of wooden bridges throughout the area. Can you tell us how those bridges have been standing up in the bad weather?
Not good. We've actually, upon entering Parliament in 2020, during the first standing finance committee, going through what we very affectionately refer to as the yellow books, but the estimates of expenditure, where the government of the day would itemize specific areas of expenditure expected to be completed within that fiscal year. We noticed two programs for the removal and restoration, the removal and replacement of wooden bridges, one out of rural development at the time, as well as one out of the Ministry of Works. So immediately upon seeing this, perhaps quite naively, believing that work would be done because they have allocated money for it, we utilized all the field officers and across the constituency, put together a very detailed list utilizing photographs, sending all of this information to the ministry of these wooden bridges and the impact that they have. We have a community in Lightbourne, so that is an alternative route to the highway, so you will end up on the highway in Claxton Bay. But there are several wooden bridges on that stretch. One that we had to highlight via protests, several media releases, a media tour of the area as well, and still the work has been approved. They put up a sign saying work to begin, and still we are facing the same problem. I think, going through the presentation by MP Parry, even based on the question as to wooden bridges, the problem that we are facing is that the government is unwilling to do the work that they were elected to do. I don't know if they believe that they are the government for some people and not all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But if you control access to the resources, you control direct access to these programs. You cannot have members of parliament begging and scraping for basic needs. As MP Paray said, it is so vindictive to rural communities that you leave us hanging. And you cannot tell me that they've been unable to replace these wooden bridges in at least the last 2 years, much less the last 7 years.
Okay. There has been concerns by engineers at the University of the West Indies that there is simply not enough raw materials locally to fix roads and so on. Particularly, there may be a shortage of asphalt and bitumen.
I want to just start. That is why I started my presentation by outlining the role of the members of parliament and the role of the government. There are certain very specific things that government must provide. They must ensure the safety and security of the nation by way of our national security apparatus, etc. They must ensure the provision of basic goods like roads, infrastructure. It is their key, main duty to maintain the infrastructure of the island. Because without the infrastructure, we cannot have business, we cannot have education, we cannot have any of the other things. That is the basic. And so they're telling us that they, as the government, having a problem sourcing raw material, and therefore they cannot do their one job, the job that they have, because they're not successful on national security, certainly not successful on infrastructure, not successful on healthcare, not successful on education, but that you cannot do this because of access to raw materials. Well, quit, because you are unable to do your job. I cannot go to my employer if I am doing a consultancy. I cannot go to them and say, hey, here now, couldn't get that, So, next rounds, maybe. It's impossible. So we have to set a higher standard for government. There are things that governments are expected, duty-bound to do as part of our social contract. If they are unable to do that, they must resign their position, and as a government, that means call an election.
If I could only add as well, I find it strange that comment is even relevant in terms of accessing material, where you have neighboring Guyana is expanding their road network and thousands of barges are falling into the ports in Guyana on a daily basis. So clearly it's a part, I think it's slackness and laziness on the part of the government to even search for resources for road building exercises. And it comes to mind another thing. There is no effort to even put temporary fixes as well. So even if you don't have any material and the money now, 30, 40 years ago, what were we doing to fix landslips and so on? We're using Gabon baskets, bamboo. There is no effort on the part of the state to do anything. And I think they are caught right now with their pants literally down because of the speed at which the collapse has happened over the last month. I think they are in Wonderland right now and they don't have a clue what to do going forward.
MP Paray, you mentioned the recent cash flows. In 2021, according to the Public Sector Investment Program, 736 million was invested in roads and bridges, as well as an additional 74.9 million in the rehabilitation of several sections of roadways across Trinidad. Do you have much faith that these new cap loans will improve road infrastructure, considering the amount that has already been spent in the past years?
Well, that claim may or may not be true. What I can tell you, I've seen several roads being resurfaced in places that don't need it. Right? There are many places in North Trinidad, even right here sometimes in Port of Spain, you see road paving exercises on roads that were pretty much in good condition.
Going from good to better.
Yeah, and yet you are leaving the roads in the rural communities in a wasteful and wasted stage of development. I am aware that the Minister of Finance does have the power to change the requirement in terms of what the money can be used for at the end of the day. So I think within his prerogative, he can do that. But taking into consideration the collapsed state of our infrastructure over the last few years, I am sure this is one area that they ought to have stayed steadfast in spending the money, because you need a mobile nation to move money around. You need a mobile nation to get students to school on time. You need a mobile nation to get emergency services into rural communities. Just last year, you'd have had the MP for Princestown complain about the inability of the fire services to get a fire truck into one of his communities where there was, I think, 2 deaths because of a fire. How can a government sit and make this acceptable? Just a month during the Standing Finance Committee, I raised the matter of no fire tender in Rio Claro. And the minister's response that that is business. That is the chief fire officer to make that decision. That's the kind of callousness that we are dealing with. And that is something that shows that the government is not fit to lead, and the Prime Minister must do the honorable thing. Call an elections and put a competent leader, put a competent government in place, and let's take Trinidad and Tobago outside of this quagmire that we find ourselves in.
The Prime Minister has recently stated that as soon as the dry season reaches, there will be a massive nationwide infrastructural program. What do you think?
So for the past 7 years, because this is not an incident in a vacuum. We did not get up this morning and say, oh my goodness, what is happening? So for the past 7 years, there would have been a neglect for infrastructural maintenance, that you would have not fixed problems when they were small, and now you've waited until they are large multi-million-dollar projects at this point. That you cannot tell me that as a nation, we must be saying, okay, well, we have to wait until dry season and hope for the best. These landslips, while I emphasize with commuters, in some of these instances, both in our constituencies in Moruga, Table and in Princeton, homes are going. People are losing their homes. I visited a community in San Fabian. The home, every time rain falls, somebody is losing a home. Macaulay, Caratal, these are the lives of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and you want to tell them dry season? No, we can accept that certain types of work can only be done at a certain point in time. But there's been dry seasons for the past 7 years. What is so special about 2023's dry season that we had to wait until then?
And when is the dry season again? Now, if all goes well, dry season kicks in sometime around February. So you're talking about 2 months. So what does our citizens do in the meantime? What do they do? Right now, Manzanilla in the rainy season, it's flooding 2 and 3 times the month. Very soon the Manzanilla roadway may be a complete swamp. But you see, what I can't get with this government and this Minister of Works, there are viable options that can be pursued on the Manzanilla side. The reason that the People's Partnership chose to build a new roadway from San Fernando to Mayaro was because the engineering work on the Naparima Mayaro Road put the cost for that at a very exorbitant fee, right? Now there are alternatives. There are alternatives to reduce the amount of traffic on the Naparima Mayaro Road. We have the Saunders Trace, Edwards Trace, Muruga Road straight to Galiota, where we can put some work into that road and get extra heavy and specially heavy vehicles on that road to Galiota Point. We can fix the Torrip Tabaquite Road. Let commuters who are heading to San Fernando out of Mayaro and Rio Claro bypass Table and go through the Tabaquite Road. If you want to come out in Princeton, pass through the Brothers Road, connect a leg. But fix those roads. Those areas have lower hanging fruits that can be repaired, can be shored up to give the motoring public an easier route to avoid that Naparima Mayaro piece between Table and Rio Claro that is causing so much of a headache at this point in time. If you can even fix from Tabaquite, head to Grand Couva, to Chaguanas, we are creating alternative traffic routes to reduce the amount of vehicles on the Naparima Mayaro Road, where you can take your time, get good science and engineering to try and fix that local road going forward. But there has been silence on the part of the minister, silence on the part of the Highways Division. They are clueless, they have no idea what to do, and they even refuse to guess. So at least give a guess, man. And they're not even doing that. So we are inside this vortex of hopelessness. And this is what we can't seem to get out of right now. And it is really alarming how depressed and hopeless our citizens are feeling this morning based on those things.
According to the World Bank, there's a link between poor infrastructure and high crime due to the fact that poor infrastructure affects education, it affects economic growth, and so forth. Do you think that if we, I mean, in terms of in our context, if we fail to really get our infrastructure under control, that we may be inadvertently exacerbating our crime problem and other social problems?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, you add simple as access roads to stop or slow down our farmers from doing their work. There's a correlation between crime and nutrition. If our lower income citizens have to pick what to eat, and because of the lack of funds, lack of jobs, they have to eat badly. You have nutrition issues in young children heading into early childhood, heading into primary school. And there is a link, according to some studies, based on criminal activity and the minds on nutrition. So to answer your question, yes, every single portion of the responsibility of the state has to work together to ensure that the citizens remain healthy, remains well fed, if that's the word I want to use, that our school has a good sporting program to maintain health and wellness, that our hospital systems can identify these issues at an early stage. But since September 2015, when the pilots changed and the airplanes went into autopilot, we have seen every portion of this country, this economy, even our international standing has collapsed. So it is going to take a real, I mean, it's going to be difficult, but I do believe that we have this fiscal space. I do believe we have the monetary space, that we can change the fortunes of this country, that we can reset back our country in a path to growth, but it will not happen under this PNM regime. And I have no hope, I have no expectations for anything positive coming out of that government over the next 36 months as we head into a general election in 2025 or before.
I think what the state of our infrastructure is a visual representation of the state of our country. Those photos that you saw, the constant collapsing, the falling apart, it is a visual representation of the overall state of Trinidad and Tobago at this time. And that's not in a space to be negative or to cry down the country. It is to say that once something has been neglected, it will go into a state of neglect. And so you have had a government coasting, spending money on all sorts of things. So as MP Paray rightfully pointed out, we do not have a resource problem. We have a competence problem. We have a problem of priorities, that you can prioritize different types of work. And I'm not going to use any specific example here because everybody in the country knows the things that I am talking about. But if you cannot connect your communities, if you cannot go from point A to point B, if you cannot go to work, we are doing nothing as a country in terms of working towards our national development. And so if you needed no clearer picture of Trinidad and Tobago, then rather than look constituency by constituency all over this country and see the state of collapse because we've been neglected by a neglectful government. And as MP Paray rightfully said, until the pilots change, until we change course, we are in for a very dangerous space.
Those are the questions we have.
Well, thank you very much. We were very happy, both MP Anita Haynes and myself, to bring to you this midweek media press briefing, and we look forward to joining you on Sunday for another installment of our press briefing. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.